I have with me today an award-winning pianist, musician, composer, arranger, band leader, and educator whose second album, Convergence, is dropping in October. Welcome, Nick Maclean.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure having you here. I love the mic. It almost looks like you're going to play for me while we're talking a couple of notes, and you'll sing along as you're doing this, as opposed to it just being a conversation. But given that we've had a previous conversation, given that I've seen you live, I don't mind. If you want to break into a song, that's perfectly fine.
I don't think anyone wants that.
Are you kidding? You are a talented musician. I'm
a talented piano player, not so much a singer.
I don't know. Maybe you do scat really well, perhaps. I know a trumpet player that I spoke with that, because the mics went dead on him, he had to do a sort of a live scat thing while they were working on the electronics, and said it actually worked out really well. But I'm not sure how well you could handle that. I have to say, though, getting to see you live was an absolute pleasure. It gave me more insight into your connection with music. I mean, as I said before, I watched your sessions. And I've watched you working, on the piano, but the camera's just on you and the band members are separated and everything. But then seeing you live, seeing the interaction between you and the other band members, unbelievable difference to that. And I had said to you, it's a tangible difference that I really, really like to see, because it gives me that background piece to how you get into your music. And I have to say, man, I watched you and I saw like it was like watching a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing, because you attacked your piano, you played with it like it was you're just enjoying it, you're just having fun, and the notes were just coming onto their own, and you were really excited and happy with what was coming out of the machine. And then other times you were actually speaking to it, and I don't know what is going on in your head as you're playing. You're talking, and I can see it's this really stoic look on your face as you're having a conversation, as you're playing on the keyboard. I want to get an understanding of that. What is going through your head when you're in those different stages? The attack stage, the playful one, I've seen that with other instrument players, and their explanation is very much the same. They get lost in the music and it's fun. But it's the attacking and the conversations that I really want to understand. So give me some background on that.
So, I mean, it's in terms of what I'm thinking about, nothing really. When I'm in that zone, when I'm in that mode, I'm trying to be as engaged with what's happening, as in the moment as I can. Right. And like, musicians like we put in thousands of hours of practice in order to make the things that we're playing instinctual, so that we're not engaging on a conscious level.
Right.
Like, we're going to be engaging on a conscious level at some level in the performance, but ideally as much of it as possible is happening underneath that, into the instincts, so that we can react in the moment to things, and so that we can follow intuitions to places that we might not expect.
Right.
So, like, if I'm attacking the piano, it's just because I'm getting really excited, and I'm not letting myself. I'm forgetting the word for it, but I'm not holding myself back. I'm just letting myself go wherever that takes me. Right. And as for the talking, so I'm probably humming along with what I'm doing. Because I used to, like, it years ago, I was working on trying to get a really solid melodic thread through my solos, like a through line that I was able to follow, and I found that singing while I played was a way that really helped connect my mind with my hands in a way that just made things sync up a little bit more and gave things more of a coherent narrative. And so for years I would sing while I was playing, but then I would start to get annoyed with it, because like, okay, well, the playing sounds great, but the singing really is quite terrible. So I've calmed that down a bit, but I'll still hum or something every now and again, because it'll be an unconscious thing that comes out while I'm playing.
Okay, because what my interpretation was, when you were being angry, when you were attacking the keyboard, it was like you're driving the conversation. So the four band members are playing, and it's your turn. You're driving the conversation. So I'm going to say, this is where we're going. And the rest of you follow suit. When the other band members would start to kick in, like Brownman would kick in, and you just sort of play back, and you could see yourself relax. You sort of lean back away from the keyboard, and you've got this huge smile on your face. And it's like, yeah, I'm here. I'm just here for the fun. I'm just here for the fun. The conversation piece, it's not humming because you're actually articulating. And I wish I had filmed it so that I could see if I could get what words you're saying.
Right.
But it's almost as if you are speaking to the bits and pieces that you're playing, not from a technical perspective, not saying, okay, here's the break. Okay, this is where I'm. It's more like you're walking yourself or the keyboard through what part of the session you're going into. Okay, now we're going to dive. Okay, now we're picking this up. Okay, now I'm going. And that's it. It's these quick little, not even conversations, it's these quick little statements that you were making as you're playing. And you could see your brain was working. So it's not like it's a process, and I'm sure it is subconscious, but it's that subconscious part of your brain that wants to take control. And so you speak control, because everything else is so subconscious that it just sort of happens. But this is where your subconscious brain is saying, no, today I need a control right here. I need to do this thing here. And you're saying it and probably don't even realize that you're articulating it with your mouth. You're actually saying, because anybody sitting as close as we were sitting to the stage would have seen you talking. And they go, what's he saying? Is he singing? Is he singing along, or is he saying something to one of the band members, but they're too far away? Or, does he have one of those secret mics and he's going, okay, get the guy in the back corner. But it was really, I loved watching it, because you see different artists when they play and how they get themselves lost. Your bassist will on occasion drift off. Like, he just goes away and he's playing music, but his eyes are shut. He's backed away from his instrument, but his hands are flying all over it. Yep. It's like, okay, I'm gone, and I'm in the music now. I've just drifted off. It's almost like you'd see him levitate and float away from it, but the music would continue to play. You have such complexities. I would love to watch an entire 3 or 4 hours of you playing piano just to see where you go and when you get there, and then be able to analyze. I'm an analyst. Watch things to see what's happening in music and to see where things are going on. I really love doing that. The interaction between you and Brownman, you and the drums, you and the bass, unbelievable. I love watching that. You guys have such synergy. You have such connection. It's as though you've been doing this for decades, and I know it hasn't been that long, has it? How long has the quartet been together?
The quartet has been together since 2016. Brownman and I have been playing together for almost a decade. So
really?
we've built a real thing, and we understand where each other's coming from, and we understand each other's personal language. So we're able to interact with that very easily and very forthrightly. Ben Duff, the bass player that you would have saw us with, we started playing with him in 2019. Okay. And the original bassist for the group is a cat named Jesse Dici. He's a phenomenal bass player. He's been getting busier with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. So
oh my goodness, okay.
Have quite as much time for Nick Maclean Quartet. So Ben Duff picked up the reins, and then. The drummer that you saw us with is a young cat in Toronto named Jackson Haynes. He just started his 4th year at Humber, and so the level of interaction that you're seeing, it's really a testament to his ability to adapt and get his head into new situations, because that was his first time playing with us. That was the 3rd show on the tour, right. But that's the first time that he's ever played with the group, and he fit right in like a glove. He's also a workhorse, so he studied the book like crazy, right. But he got everything inside himself so that he was able to get access the same space as us, able to react on an instinctual level, and there was no holding back. He was given his absolute 110% ferocity of the drums, which is what that band needs.
Yeah, and it was funny watching him, the expression on his face, because occasionally I would glance straight at him, and it almost looked like he surprised himself. on a number of occasions. He'd be playing, and all of a sudden, he'd get the little look on his face, his eyes would go, "Whoa, what was that?" And you'd see him go, "Well," and he'd keep playing, and he'd smile and get more into it, more. And then all of a sudden, another one would go, and he'd go, "Whoa," and his eyes light up, and it's like, "Oh, I like that." And
well, that's the thing with this kind of music. When it's being done really well, and I hope that we do it really well. It's exploration, and this is what Herbie Hancock was doing. This is what Miles Davis was doing. What Wayne Shorter was doing. They were getting up on stage, and there was a willingness to fall on one's face, because you're diving into the unknown, and you don't know where it's going to take you. And so that's partly what makes it so exciting, because when it takes you to a really interesting place, you're like, "Oh, I didn't know we were going to go there, but we did, and it was great."
Yeah, that's that level of improvisation that I said when we were talking earlier, that your music has. Even though there is control to it, there is an entire song that you've built, you've developed it, you've arranged it, but there's still that playful improvisational feel to it. And the song that we're going to be playing at the end of our interview has that bright, engaging session light, but it also has this feeling of improvisation, which I thought is really cool. When you hear it, you feel like, am I listening to a band that's playing a song that they played many times before, or am I listening to a group that got together and it just banging away at something that sounds phenomenal? And it holds its own, which is really, really, really good. And people are going to hear this at the end, but it's the fact that you have that creative skill to make something sound nuanced. And I imagine it's because of the playing. Every time you play it, you don't play it exactly the same way. And it's possible that's the reason why you speak to your keyboard, because you're saying, "I'm going to change this up. I'm going to go in this direction. I'm going to go." Maybe that's what you're doing. I don't know. We'll get the psychiatrist in 15 minutes to talk to you. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, really, really like that. Now, you didn't begin with the quartet. You began with an electric jazz group, Snaggle, yes. Correct?
Yeah. So Snaggle...
How did it evolve? How did it evolve from Snaggle to the quartet? Walk me through that.
Well, so Snaggle started in my fourth year at Humber, because fourth years at Humber do a recording project as part of the curriculum. So the bass player of Snaggle, a cat named Doug Moore, and we decided to pool our sessions so that we could put out a full album. And so that was how Snaggle was born. We both did some writing for that group, and we put out a self-titled record called Snaggle in 2014, I think.
Okay.
And so that band takes a lot of influences from Weather Reports, from Return to Forever, like a lot of 1970s era electric jazz, but also modern influences like Snarky Puppy are a big influence for the group. So it's that flavor of writing, and at the time it was like that kind of stuff was very new for me. I was introduced to electric jazz by Doug in my third year at Humber, because he was super into it. And so he started feeding me lots of things like Hiromi Uehara, like Brecker Brothers, like 1970s Miles Davis, all that kind of stuff. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I was really excited to explore this new kind of thing. I bought an electric keyboard and we're doing all that kind of thing. And so Snaggle was gigging, and we did that for a long while. And then so I met Brownman a year or two after we released that first record. We were playing in a big band in Toronto called the Socialist Night School, which was led by the tenor saxophonist Chelsea McBride, fantastic tenor saxophone player, currently in New York. And Snaggle was missing a trumpet for a gig. So I asked Brown if he would sub in, because I knew him from Brownman Electric Trio. I already loved his electric playing. And so he subbed in. He had a really great time with the ensemble. He enjoyed the tunes. So when it came time to record that group's second album, The Long Slog, which came out in 2016, I asked Brown if he would guest on a couple of tracks and if he would produce the record. So that was when we started working really closely together. We discovered that we have so many things in common. We've got such similar tastes in music. We've got a lot of the same values in terms of what we value from artistic output. Like we like a lot of the same like books and shows and movies. Like we're both huge science fiction nerds. And so it's and we also we work similarly. Like we're both very organized people. So when the Long Slog came out in 2016, Brown signed the group to Brown to Source Records, his Brooklyn-based jazz label, and he brought me on board as a label manager. And so we started working together a whole lot. And so Brown, shortly after that time, Brown came to me and said, "Hey, man, back in my day, I mean, not that his day is done, but when I was a young man, I was getting all the calls for all the Latin jazz trumpet chairs, and I was getting known as the Latin jazz trumpet player.
Right.
And like his band Crusoe was had just won like the Montreal Grand Prix de Jazz, and were touring the country, and so he was very much getting known in that realm, and he was concerned about getting pigeonholed as only doing the Latin jazz thing.
Jazz, bossa nova, that
yeah, and especially a man like Brownman, there are a lot of different facets to his artistry. So, hence was the birth of Brownman Electric Trio and Groove Asylum and all of his other, 8 other incredibly creative ensembles. And so he said to me, "Listen, man, you're in danger of getting known as the electric jazz keyboard player if you don't do something else. I know Herbie Hancock is a big influence for you. Why don't you do something that showcases those influences?"
Right.
And so this was the birth of the Nick Maclean Quartet, because I'm a huge fan of Herbie Hancock, and like especially his 1960s Blue Note era recordings, like Maiden Voyage and Empyrean Isles. Those are touchstones.
Voyage. Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and like in that era, the Herbie was using the Miles Davis rhythm section, like the rhythm section of the second Miles Davis quintet with Wayne Shorter. So Tony Williams on drums, Ron Carter on the bass, but instead of Miles Davis filling the trumpet role, it was the firebrand Freddie Hubbard. And so, I knew I needed a firebrand in my band, so I was like, "Hey, Brown, would you play trumpet for me?" And he very graciously said yes. And the rest is history. We grabbed Jesse Dici on bass, and Tyler Gertson was the drummer at the time, whom Tyler and I had gone through Humbert together, so we played together for years. And in 2017, we put out our first record, Rites of Ascension.
That's right.
Yeah, which showcases some of our Herbie Hancock influences. Like we opened the record with 3 cuts from Herbie Hancock. It's been a while, so I'm forgetting. We open with Cantaloupe Island, the classic Herbie Hancock tune. Then we move into Driftin', a cut off his first record as a band leader, Taken Off, and then that the super hard, like super fast tune off of not Maiden Voyage, Empyrean Isles, One Finger Snap.
Right.
It's like, this is a classic tune that's used by like older folks at a jam session to clear the stage of youngsters, because it's brutally difficult. And then we start diving into some of my originals, and there's a Brownman original on that one as well, called The Madness of Nero, which is a long form odyssey, and it's incredible. And so that was the first record, and we put it out in 2017. It did really well. We were really humbled by the reception. It won a couple of awards, and we toured the country with it in 2019. Which at the time we had to leave Jesse and Tyler at home because they were getting busy with other things, and so we grabbed Ben Duff for that tour, and then we also grabbed Jacob Wutzke, who's an incredible drummer. He's based in Montreal these days. He's got his own modern jazz project that just put out a record called Show Yourself, which is a fantastic album. And he's also the drummer for the 2-time Juno winning vocalist Katie George. And so he's touring the country with her lots. But so when we did the national tour in 2019, Brownman and I, like we pulled each other aside, like at the end of the tour, and it's like, okay, these 2 guys, Ben Duff and Jacob Wutzke, these guys are special. And especially after a month and a half on the road, you build real synergy with cats. So we knew that we wanted to do a record with these guys. And so I started writing tunes like almost as soon as we got back. So like, okay, we're gonna get this done. This is gonna be great. And then, everyone knows what happened in 2020, the global pandemic.
Yeah.
That shuttered everything. And we had a tour booked, we had studio time booked, we were all ready to go, and then everything got canceled. So we So it got it got backburnered for a little while. I did a solo piano double disc record called Can You Hear Me, released
Yeah.
in
So
2021. And
this is something that I had to ask you. I mean, in 2020, pandemic starts. 2021, you get introspective and you decide to do a solo album. Now, was this something you had to get out of your system and say, okay, I'm just going to do this while I'm all by myself because it's solo, I'm alone, and I can't get together with anybody? Or was this more of just a creative outlet? Because my understanding is you did Dolphin Dance on that double album. And then Brownman listened to that and said, "We can adapt that to the new album, your one that's dropping in October, because you put that into Convergence, did you not?"
so actually, it's the reverse. So Nick Maclean Quartet was already playing Dolphin Dance in live shows.
Really?
Yeah. It didn't make it to Rites of Ascension, but it's a classic Herbie Hancock tune that's considered a standard.
Right.
So we absolutely pull it out because we love that tune. So we knew we were going to record it on the new record, and Nick Maclean Quartet kind of had a way that we did it. We had our own little isms that went into Dolphin Dance, and
Right.
So the solo piano record was something that I wanted to do for a while. So I studied with David Braid at the University of Toronto, and he does a lot of solo work, and he imparted a lot of his own knowledge and processes and stuff into me as I was studying with him. So he has an enormous influence as to how I approach solo piano. And so I knew this was something that I wanted to do because solo piano is so important for a piano player.
I have to ask, this individual that assisted you, are their influences, or was his influences people like Bill Evans and Keith Jarrett? Because when I listened to your solo pieces, I had a little Harry Winston thrown in there. It's kind of like you did a mashup of stylings, even though it's all your own. Or George Winston, not Harry. George Winston, Bill Evans, Keith Jarrett were the names that popped into my head as I'm listening to you, because you've got a lively, varied style in it. But there were a few pieces that felt very introspective, felt very, very from the soul, kind of reaching it in and pulling it out. And so that, to me, that's a sort of a George Winston feel to the piano. Were those his influences, or were they your influences?
Those were my influences. I mean, like I'm sure David takes influences from some of those guys too, because it's hard to be a jazz piano player and not have checked out some of those giants. But it's from Braid I got more processes and how to think about music, and like honestly he was the first teacher who told me how to learn music. It's crazy. It took me until my master's degree before someone sat me down like, okay, this is how you actually learn. And rather than just, okay, here's what you should learn.
Right.
And it completely changed so many things for me. It reorganized how I approached my instrument, and a lot of how I take in new information today, how I organize it, how I spit it out, as well as how I teach students, comes a lot from the lessons that I learned from him. So I wanted to do a solo record for a long while because it's a very important thing for solo piano players. It sets the foundation for everything else. And so the pandemic just happened to be, a very convenient time. You can't be in a room with anyone else, so why not just do a project where you don't have to be in a room with anyone else?
Sure.
So linking back to Dolphin Dance, Dolphin Dance wasn't actually something that I planned to record for the solo piano record. I had about 10 tunes, a couple of arrangements of standards, but mostly originals that I composed, and a lot of it was like really, really intellectual, like really heavy kind of material. And so Brown was producing, and he knew that if I put out a record with just that kind of stuff, it was going to be a lot for people. It was going to be really dense, and because you need to break that up with something a little bit more soulful, something, not that kind of material can't be full of emotion, but sometimes you gotta have something simple.
You gotta breathe every once in a while, otherwise you're holding your breath for the entire album, or both.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if you put on like Bill Evans solo, listening to like Nardis or something, you don't listen to that and you're like, oh my God, what a deep intellect. You go, oh my God, that's so beautiful. And then you notice the deep intellect behind it, but it's the emotion of it that hits you first.
Yep.
So what we did in the studio is, so we recorded the tunes that we planned to record, but then every now and again, Brown would go on the microphone from the control room and go, hey, Nick, you know how to play Someday My Prince Will Come, right? Hey, okay, so why don't you start with like an introspective Bill Evans 3, and then move into like a drunk and staggering waltz, and then like the party dress comes off and it's like a funky 4 where you're dancing and all that kind of stuff. And on a bunch of the tracks on the record, we kept Brown's instructions to me so that the listener can see, okay, well this was the in the moment instructions, and this is what I did with it. And so Dolphin Dance was one of those where we already played it with the quartet, and so all Brown said was, hey man, you know how to play Dolphin Dance. We do it with the quartet. I want you to do a solo piano version of that informed by the Nick Maclean Quartet version. So the Nick Maclean Quartet version technically came first, even though the solo piano one was released first.
That explains it better. Yeah, when I hear it backwards, right? Because I'm hearing it and I hear the instruction and I listen to it and then I hear the Nick Maclean version, and it's almost as if one is learning from the other, but it's the reverse. And it's so wild to hear that it's the reverse, because now my brain has to take it and reinterpret what I spent time listening to, because it sounds so much nicer to say, this is what I did first, and then we took it and evolved it into this. And you hear it. When you're listening to it that way, you actually hear that evolution. But then to hear it, it's a devolution of, we did it this way, and now I'm going to take it and just sort of singularize it by doing it this way. And it's, oh, well, that's an entirely different brain space. Like, come on. So you've just messed my head up. Now I have to go listen to things again. But so do I have to listen to all the songs on your solo album, because they're informed from other music that was band played, as opposed to the reverse, which is you singled it out and then it became band music?
Actually, I think that's the only one that took that order. I don't think there's anything else on Can You Hear Me that that took strong influences from any of my other groups. I think
taking some of the solo work and putting it out on a third album that might be coming up, and we don't need to talk about that quite yet. But I've got some ideas of some of the original solo piano works that I might want to rework for Snaggle for their next release, because that's the band that I'm turning to next. Oh, really?
Yeah. It's been a while since Snaggle's gotten a release. The last one was in 2016. Right. And I miss that group because it's a lot of fun. It's fun to be doing the double stack keyboard, electric Rhodes kind of thing on the bottom, synth Moog sounds on top, but also like the writing for that group, I really enjoy composing for it, because that band is all about contrasts, and it's all about trying to make elements that don't feel like they ought to work together in a way that feels logical. And I mean, like, the lens that it's all being explored through is through the lens of electric jazz, but we go some weird places. Like the our holiday single that we released in 2016, it's called Christmas Tune, and it starts off with like a Bach chorale kind of a texture between the trumpet and tenor saxophone, and then it immediately takes a hard left into like this creepy, foreboding thing with like this almost like Predator kind of effect on the bass, which immediately takes a hard left into this super loud and aggressive, like almost metal kind of thing before it calms down, and then it finishes off as a polka.
Okay, that is a holiday album. That sounds like Christmas at my house, but
well, actually, so the influence behind that tune, I'm not a fan of commercial Christmas music. Like, as soon as December rolls around, I find like, all the radio stations in every mall across North America, like just everything that comes out is happy. And it's the same version of happy, like, happy, sappy, unicorns and rainbows kind of thing. And it's so I I decided to write. I saw a gap in the market, so I decided to create a Christmas tune that encompassed a much wider range of human emotion. So that's
the natural human emotion, the family get together human emotion, for the majority of people. The happy I get because when you're in the mall or you're driving towards the mall, because that's what you're only doing in the Christmas season, it puts you in the mood to shop. You're happy, you're going to buy something nice, buy something expensive because you're happy. But if you had the reality music shoved in your face, you'd be going, nope, screw everybody. I'm not getting them anything. Give them a gift card at best. That's it. I'm out of here. I'm going home. It's a good news. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to if I can find it, your Snaggle Christmas music, because that's worth listening to. I missed that one in my research, and I think it's more because I see holiday music and I'm thinking, holiday music. I'm not listening to jazz holiday music. I really seriously am not. But this sounds much better. Much, much, much better.
Well, for people looking for it, everything can be found at my website, nicholasmaclean.com, under the albums tab. Everything's listed there.
Okay. Because I went there, but I didn't. Did I see Snaggle?
Snaggle's pretty far down. It's the solo piano's on top, and then it's Nick Maclean Quartet, and then it's Snaggle.
Have you thought of adapting the two together, putting Nick Maclean and Snaggle together and doing some kind of modern, updated, refreshed kind of version of electric jazz with regular, smooth or, kind of warping the jazz? I mean, you kind of do with the trumpet, and I'll explain why I say that, because I was just yesterday speaking with CTK out of San Diego. He's a trumpet player, really phenomenal trumpet player. He uses a physical mute. The first time he'd ever heard of a digital mute was when I told him that Brownman was using a digital mute. And I said, it's phenomenal, the difference. Like, you can go from mic to mic and be playing regular trumpet, then go to a muted trumpet, and then have all these other effects. And he said, I have never heard of that before. And you hear his muting, beautiful, absolutely stunning, the sound effect that he gets. But it's that idea that you're already using the digital. Why not take that one step further and apply it to your bass, apply it to the drums, apply it to your keyboard. You can have the dual keyboard, right? You can have that stacked keyboard there and be playing the kind of music. I'm thinking, I'm sorry, I'd be creative here. Someday my prince will come. Do that as electric jazz. Take that, and instead of doing the regular, start it out as a waltz, then go to the drunken, and then make it, bossa nova. Take it, warp it. Like, just go sideways with it. Started out and all of a sudden it just twists.
Yeah. And you're right. We do kind of do that with Convergence a little bit. Like the writing in Convergence is a little bit more intricate, a little bit more involved than Rites of Ascension. So there are some of those leanings from Snaggle where I'm trying to put together elements that are a little bit further apart. It's not quite the same thing, but then we also have the electronics on Brown's trumpet. So it's not so what he's using isn't technically considered a mute. They're considered they're effects pedals that he's running it through. And Brown does still have physical mutes that he uses when the time calls for it. Like they're on the first record, Rites of Ascension, there's a tune called it's been such a long time since we played it. Something about the crossroads, Blue versus Brown. I'm totally blanking on the name of the tune, but it's a tune that's inspired a little bit by that old blues legend of Robert Johnson going to the crossroads and selling his soul to the devil so he could play blues like no other. And so when I brought the tune to Brown, he's like, "Oh my God, this is just the hardest tune ever." And so the joke is that he sold his soul to play it because he sounds pretty good on it now. But when we play that tune, he brings out a plunger for it and he does the whole thing. But yeah, for its live, he's been experimenting a little bit with incorporating some of his electronics at Nick Maclean Quartet shows. So I asked him if he would do that a little bit for the record. So for a couple of the tunes, there's some wah wah pedal, there's some delay in some other places. Yep. And actually there's an Easter egg on the album cover that pays homage to that. So
really?
The Brownman Electric Trio's second album, Gravitation, features Brownman, a cyborg Brownman in a spacesuit, like descending rapidly onto a planet surface through the atmosphere, and like there are flames coming off his back and all that kind of stuff. And so on the Convergence album cover, it's me sitting on the ground in a desolate, like post-apocalyptic apocalyptic landscape with all the planets in the background. It's lining up, but then in the middle ground, kind of small, you have to look for it, is the cyborg Brown in a spacesuit crash landing onto the planet, and we wanted to put that there as a little nod to the fact that he's bringing just a little bit of the Brownman Electric Trio into Nick Maclean Quartet.
Oh, fantastic! I love that, because now you're thinking beyond just the music. You're thinking of it from an entire encompassing perspective, right? Somebody buys the album, like I think we talked about the art from Yes Song and that very artistic value that they brought forward. It wasn't just the music, it's everything. So you collect the covers because they speak to it as well, right? To the music stylings and so forth. So I love that. I'm going to have to go back and look at the cover and go, oh yeah, there it is. I can see that, because I did notice that scientific kind of view to both the Rites of Ascension and Convergence. And you had said that, you have that leaning towards sci-fi, that you'd love to bring that into your artwork. So that's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I love that. So I'm trying to go through here. I've got a list of questions, and you met Brownman and he's been your producer. He's been working with you. How much would you say he is the influence of the music, or you're the influence of the music? Is it a two-way street? Does he bring things up to you that suddenly like blow your mind, that you're going, that was not the direction? Because as you said, your mentor had taught you how to learn music. And does Brownman bring things that completely, it's like contrary to everything, this is the way I've learned music, and all of a sudden he says, well, what about this? And you, what? Has that ever happened?
It's all the time. It's so I mean, it's Brown and I have been playing together for almost a decade now. Like he took me under his wing when I was 22. And I've learned so much from that man about music, about business, about graphic design, about philosophy, about politics, about art. He's built me over the last 10 years. And so I mean, it's on a very large scale. He has an enormous influence in my artistic output because he's had such a deep impact on my evolution over the last 10 years. Right. Now, when it comes time for him sitting in the producer role, he's very sensitive to the direction that his artist wants to go. And he's produced 4 different records for me. Now he produced The Long Slog in 2016, Rites of Ascension in 2017, Can You Hear Me in 2021, and now Nick Maclean Quartet's Convergence in 2023. And so I've got to see him as a producer in a whole bunch of different contexts: electric jazz, modern jazz, solo piano. And in everyone, he's extremely concerned with making sure that he understands the artist's vision. So, like, while he is always going to, suggest things, and he's always, when he has input, he's always going to give it, because he's got such a wealth of information and wisdom and experience over the years, but he takes great pains to make sure that it's couched within the vision. So, like, you're never going to get something from Brown's like, hey, Nick, why don't we make this a smooth jazz album, or something like that. It's he's never going to completely change the direction of an album. He's very much concerned with getting inside of the artistic vision and then bringing out the best possible version of that artist, of realizing that vision to the fullest extent possible. Right. Like when we did the solo piano record, he just mentioned it casually in one of our emails. But like, yeah, I just finished listening to like my 88th solo piano record, and and then went on to that. He was doing intensive research, listening to countless solo piano records just to get an overall sense of what solo piano jazz as a whole sounded like, and the vast breadth and colors that it is, so that he could get an idea where I wanted to fit in the whole, and so he could help guide and say, okay, well, you want this kind of thing in these records. This is the kind of thing that people have been going for, and then he presents it to me, and then as the artist, I get to make the final say of, yeah, you know what, that's really cool, or no, you know what, I've got a different direction. I want to do things differently than these people. So, and
he allows for the Nick Maclean flavor of what experienced in doing 88 or 90 albums of solo piano. He brings forward, this is the way it worked for them, and you listen to it, or you'll hear what he's talking about, and you'll say, you know what, how about this? And you go, oh, yeah. And then he gets a little bit of a learning exercise from what Nick Maclean is all about, right?
Yeah. And it's not so much about allowing the Nick Maclean to show up, but it's very much he's trying to bring out the best version of Nick Maclean in those scenarios.
Okay, so he's never playing the not the drill you're looking for thing. He's actually allowing you to do that to him. These are not the notes I'm looking for. You know?
Yeah, and he's an evolutionist. He's someone who has deep respect and knowledge of the jazz tradition, and everything that he does is rooted in it. But it's very much with the eyes looking at tomorrow and the jazz of things to come. Because he's and myself as well. Neither of us are all that interested in recreating the jazz that's already happened,
right?
Because it's already happened. It's already fantastic, and so we wanna contribute our own small part of the overall jazz tapestry. Because jazz music as a whole is very much about the individual voice. People can put on Miles Davis or John Coltrane or Herbie Hancock or Chick Corea, and know that it's these guys. Even if it's a recording that you haven't heard before, they'll know that it's these guys just based on their personality that comes out of their instrument.
Exactly.
And probably the biggest compliment that you can pay to someone is you can say, hey, I heard a track on the radio, and I knew it was you. I didn't know who was playing, but I knew it had to be you. From and that's that's a huge compliment, because it shows that they understand who you are as your own personality in the art form. And it's because all the greats that we idolize when we take influences from, we don't want to be them, because they're already them, and they're going to be the best versions of. If I try and be Herbie Hancock, there's already a giant of jazz that exists who's called Herbie Hancock, and he's already pretty freaking incredible. So I want to be the best Nick Maclean, and part of that is taking a lot of influence from Herbie Hancock, but also taking influence from a lot of other places, and all those influences are going to swirl together with my own my own agenda, and whatever comes out the other side is going to be me. Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, you listen to some of the players, and you mentioned Chick Corea. And when I was doing my research on you, I went and listened to him, because you had mentioned, or reading through your material, I hear that you bring up some of these pianists. And when you listen to Chick Corea, there's a very heavy classical influence. You hear it in his music. So when you hear his music, that's got to be him, because of the level of classical music that's coming through when you listen to him play. And then you listen to Herbie Hancock, and you hear there's less of this classical influence. It's more of an improvisational, subtly out, sort of like he's in his own head when he's playing. He's not going through the chords of he doesn't have that in his head at all. And that's the uniqueness of Herbie Hancock. When I listen to you play, I hear the influences. So it is you. If I heard you playing someplace else, if somebody was playing music and it was your music, I'd probably be able to say that's you, or somebody like you who has had influences like Bill Evans, influences like Keith Jarrett, influences like Herbie Hancock, but you're not. It's not just. You have all these subtleties to the way that you play that when other than if somebody's watching and you're talking to your keyboard, which I haven't seen yet in any other pianist that I've ever watched, except for some really heavy-duty classical pianists that are doing something like the rack. You see them play, you can see them talking to the keyboard, but they're talking to it because they're arguing with it, because when you play the rack, you're actually having a fight with yourself and the keyboard, and one of you is going to win. But in your case, there's a uniqueness to your playing, and I really enjoyed it when I saw it live. I really enjoyed listening to it when engaged in the research that I did. So I'm probably one of the first, if you haven't had that said to you before, that can probably pick it out that this is Nick Maclean playing piano. So
thank you.
You have a uniqueness to your style, and I'll give that to you. Keep doing what you're doing, because if you don't, you're going to fall into that vat of, he's just playing Herbie Hancock. He's just playing. No. You have a uniqueness. Keep evolving that uniqueness. That uniqueness, though, what I'd like to understand is, how does it come out from you? Do you start with sound? Do you start with the classical components of notes and timing and space and breadth and so forth? Do you work from a mechanical music perspective? Do you work from words that you want to put notes to? Do you work from a sound that you've heard and then you want to adapt that sound into something that has a rhythm and carries through the length of a song? Walk me through your creative process. I want to get into Nick Maclean's creative head.
Well, in short, yes.
No, do not. You're not giving me the Harrison Ford response. Yes.
So it's a mixture of everything. There's a lot of different things that will spark compositions or improvisations. I mean, sometimes I'll sit down to the piano and, because I'm a piano player, I'll get really excited about a specific chord or something like that. And maybe that'll spark a composition or an exploration, or maybe it'll be a little melodic snippet, or something like that. Like a little nugget of something, a chord or a melodic snippet or a bass line or something that might spark something. But it might be something else entirely. It might be an idea that I want to try and represent musically.
How to explain that one? That one just caught me when you said an idea that sparks. Give me that one, because that just triggered off a whole bunch of.
So one of the tunes on the record is a tune called True North, and so the banter that I give before we play it at shows is that this is a tune that was inspired by a geographical metaphor for moral theory. And then the rest of the band members are like, what on earth does that mean? And so True North is a fixed geographical location on the Earth, which is different from magnetic north, which shifts as the magnetic poles shift. And most of the time, that doesn't matter because they're very close together and magnetic north only shifts by small amounts. But every now and again, we get what's called a geomagnetic reversal, where the poles swap places entirely. So north becomes south and vice versa. And so anyone navigating with a compass during one of these events is in trouble, because they'll think they're going north and they're actually going the opposite direction. And so this is what I think is the interesting metaphor for moral theory, because whenever you're trying to take a stand against something or trying to fight against some kind of injustice, it's so easy to just replace that justice with a different flavor of injustice. And my feeling is that the best way to try and avoid that is to try and live one's life by a set of foundational principles, so that your own moral sense isn't guided by a moving target. And that, to me, is true north. So that was the idea. In terms of how it sparked a tune, I tried to create a tune that felt like it was anchored to a point, but it felt like it was moving around that point. So there's a lot of pedals being used. So, and by pedals I don't mean like effects pedals, but like a single note that chords vacillate around. So like I could have like a C down here, and then I'll have chords move around the C, like. And so then I have the melody that moves in similar kind of ways, that kind of ebbs and flows, but then there are parts of the melody that become untethered and move around a whole lot more, and that's exemplified in kind of the the parts of the tune that start swinging a little bit harder, a little bit more Blakey-esque, contrasting with the smoother, kind of floaty parts of the tune. So
Right.
yeah, that's how I try to kind of encapsulate an idea as a musical composition. And
I love it. I love it. That's musical representation of conceptual theory, right? So you're talking moral compass versus a fixed point, and using the idea of physical compass and moral compass in the same conversation is an interesting tack to use, because they have the same flavor, right? You can anchor yourself to logic, or you can use a moral compass that spins in all the freaking directions, and north becomes south whenever you want it to, and you can label things wherever you want on the compass and say, this is good and this is bad. Well, why? Because my moral compass says so. Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. And giving me musical representation, that's right there. You're the first person in my interviews to actually take music and explain a concept. Loved it. Absolutely love it. I hope the listeners love it. I absolutely hope the listeners love that as well.
I usually find that at least one person, if not more, comes up to me as we're going around during the break and says how much they like the stories. And with this kind of music, like it's pretty weird music what we play. Like it's not Taylor Swift that most people will put on the radio as they're driving. So it often takes us, like I always want to extend an olive branch to the audience, like a way in of experiencing and understanding what we're doing. Because I'm not one of those folks that likes to be smug about like how intellectual music is or something like that. I don't want a tightly cloistered fan base of, well, you guys get it, ha ha ha, these people don't get it. I'd like people to get it, and I want to try and give as many opportunities to connect with the music as I can. So that's partly why we do the stories in between tunes, so that as people are listening, they can think, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of hear that, or maybe I hear something else. Like, it's always interesting to hear influences that people hear that might not have been on my mind when I was writing or when we were playing the tune, because everyone takes these things through the lens of their own influences, and I mean, that's one of the beauties of this form of music, is that there's a lot that is open for interpretation, and something that might hit me in a certain way might hit someone else in an entirely different way. And I always love hearing how the music hits people, and sometimes I'm surprised of like what they take from it, which can always be really cool.
Well, that's the thing that about the music when I went and listened to it live. Your music is experiential. That's the word I'm going to use. It's experiential, because you have to get through it. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, get through the whole process. It's sort of like taking a hike. You have to go through the whole hike to see everything that's all along the pathway, to be able to say, this was a phenomenal hike, or this was the most boring hike ever, right? The fact of the matter is, the narrative gives them direction, gives them a couple of signposts to follow in the music on their own. So even the narrative can be interpreted different ways. So when you gave the narrative of the wisdom of Aurelius, when you played it, and you talked about first the Nero, right? The fire, is it the fire of Nero? The
madness of Nero.
The madness of Nero, that's correct. You gave that reference. So people got the understanding of, this was this chaos, this is this logical sense. And then you listen to the music, even to some people who's Aurelius, and what do you mean wisdom? And then they start to listen to the music, and they're experiencing the music, and they go, oh, I'm getting that now, because I'm not hearing chaotic. I'm hearing a logical assumption of sounds that makes sense to me, and now I'm following along, and I see the path. It allows them to sort of take the walk through. It's very much like performance art pieces. I'm going to say that, and you're going to cringe, because performance art, no. In the sense, I've been to galleries where all the art was tactile. You can watch it, look at it, stand there and observe, or you can actually play a role in it. And one of the pieces was this weird wooden structure that had little balls in it. And I walked over to the piece, and I picked up the wooden ball, and I put it at the top, and I walked away from the piece. And this other person came up, and it started moving. The ball started coming down, and it's going clack, bang, clack, bang, clack, bang, clack. And they're cringing. And I'm standing next to it, looking at them, looking at the piece. What's happening? And they're starting to freak out. And I simply said, no, don't worry. This is an experiential piece. You're allowed to react in whatever way feels normal to you. And they're, oh, because for them, art is something you look at.
Right.
For them, probably music is something you listen to. To get the narrative gives them more reference. So for me explaining to them, no, don't be upset that there's clacking noises. You didn't damage anything. This is the way the piece works. For you, the narrative actually allows people closer, brings them up into the musical venue to say, this is what you're listening to. Listen and see if it makes sense to you. See if you get more from the sounds. You may just enjoy listening to it, but this gives you something a little bit more. Like you say, it's the intellectual level of the music, and you don't want people just the ones that can say, oh, I understand what Aurelius is all about. I understand the stoicism of the music. No, we don't want that. We want everybody to get a view of it as being something that's more controlled and more structured, and maybe not stoic, because the sound was not, I wouldn't say it was a stoic piece. If you wanted to do a stoic piece, it would be you and the piano and a little bit of trumpet, and that would be it. And there you go, very stoic. This is the one piece of wisdom of Aurelius. It's a single piece that we throw in every once in a while. But yeah, I love that the narratives, it's almost like it's less about the music and more of an entire journey that we're taking together as audience and band. I've seen a few people that do that. I've seen a few performers that do that. I've seen a few bands that do that they talk a little bit about the music, about the experience that you're going through as an audience. Gives you a chance to breathe as well, because each piece is an emotional roller coaster too.
Yep.
And for those people that really get involved, you can't ride a roller coaster 50 times, not throw up. And I'm sure you don't want that happening.
And by the same token,
it's phenomenal. I love the way you go through the process, and I enjoy that you have a creative process that samples. You know, it's this idea or that piece of music, and that's a creative process that's not limiting, right? So anything you can turn around and look at the light switch and go, wait a minute, I just looked at that, and the way the light hit and start to play notes. Yeah, I like that. I like that. The light switch of Aurelius. I like this now.
And by the same token, like just as we like to like invite the audience in that way, we love it when the audience gets involved. Like, you know, it's when people hoot and holler and scream for solos and all that kind of stuff. Like this isn't a classical music performance where everyone politely claps and make sure you don't clap between movements. This is a living, breathing thing that we're trying to do on stage, right. and it's you'll hear it from us when someone plays something we really like. We'll say something. We'll be like, yeah, and we'll be egging the guys on because we're feeding off of each other's energy, but we also feed off of the audience's energy, and this was a big part of why. So before we recorded Convergence, I put the band on the road for 2 weeks, and we toured all around Ontario and into Quebec because in order to capture the energy of that kind of performance, you've got to actually do it. You've got to sit down in front of audiences and feed off the energy and see where it goes. Because rehearsal only takes you so far. Like rehearsal figures out how the tunes go, what the parts are, how you guys sync up, but once you're in front of an audience, it's a completely different energy, and we wanted very desperately to bring that energy to the recording studio because the recording studios, it as much as you try and make it not that vibe, you're always going to get a little bit of a separated vibe because we're all in different we're all in different rooms. We've got microphones in front of us, the red light's blinking, there's a little bit of pressure there. And so we wanted to make sure that we had lots of time to be in front of an audience to work out the synergy and work out the interaction, work out the energy so that we could do our best to replicate that when we were in the studio and bring that same kind of energy to the recorded tunes.
Yeah. So when I watched your videos of Convergence, and I said to you when we talked before that it had a session feel to it. And I wanted to see you live because I knew the live would be better when you were doing the touring prior to making the album. Did you find yourself making any adaptations to the songs that reflected better the impact of to the audience and the audience's response to it. So you played one night this way, and then the next night you made a subtle change here, and all of a sudden you got a really interesting response from the audience, and you thought, okay, this is where I'm noting this in. I'm putting this little bit. We're going to go that direction. Did you find yourself doing that over the course of those 2 weeks?
I don't know if there's anything specific audience wise that like we made a change and the audience went woo, and we're like, yeah, okay. I don't think there's anything like that, but it's the tunes were constantly getting tweaks over the course of the 2 weeks, because right before the 2 weeks we had 2 days of intensive rehearsal. We were just in Brown's basement all day just working it all out, and then over the course of the 2 weeks kinks would get worked out over the course of performance. We're like, hey, yeah, don't do that there, do this here, or maybe there are just things that we thought would work in rehearsal that when we hit the stage didn't work quite as well, so we tweaked. And that's a very normal kind of process for.
So do you go through a post-mortem after every show? Do you guys sit together in a room and go, okay, what went well and what didn't go well? What do we think went well? Yeah, we do. I mean, we don't usually usually it's like right after we've played. So like right after we finish a set, Brown will come over and we'll chat a little bit about how things went, and we'll give any notes that we have, and then same after the show, so that we do it while it's fresh, so we don't forget anything before the next one. And actually, I mean, that's a pretty normal part of our process, anyways. Like when we're on the road, like especially if we've if we're playing with someone new who we don't know very well, or who hasn't played with Nick Maclean Quartet very much, after shows, we'll usually have notes for just, okay, this tune needs a little bit more X, and then like 2 or 3 shows later, we don't have any notes because they're nailing everything, and now they're totally in it. They understand the artistic intent, and they're also putting their own their own personality into it. But so yeah, that's a very normal part of our process. So when it came time to prepare for the record, it was just implementing the same kind of procedures. But you could see that when like watching the session that you're doing the recording and you're seeing it, you could see a kind of a flavor of your playing on a stage in the eyes of some of the guys that were playing. Like, I mean, you're excessively professional, and Brownman is excessively professional, to the point where you're playing in session or you're playing on stage. It's almost the same, although I found that you are much more playful on the stage than you are in session. You do still speak to your piano when you're in session, not as much as you do on stage, and not at the same times. But what I liked about it, or loved about it, was when you're watching the videos of your drummer, which isn't the same drummer, I don't think.
No, so in the recording, it's Jacob Watsky, our regular drummer, whereas Jackson Haynes was the young cat that you saw in Ottawa.
That's right. So when you're watching those two, your bassist and the drummer, you can see them sort of more engaging in their head, like, I'm on stage, I'm playing this like I'm on stage, I'm playing this like I'm on stage, and you can see them sort of pulling from an invisible audience. Right, a little more energy. I'm going to pull out a little more energy. I'm going to pull it. You guys, when you're playing, you and Brownman, I find that you've already got that vibe going. The difference is when you're on stage, you're taking what's happening in the audience immediately and applying it through.
Yeah.
But you already got in your head an audience that is always there and always giving you feedback. And, that's how you have that look about you of, yeah, I've got energy. I've got somebody sitting, even though I'm in a basement or I'm in my studio, there's somebody right here giving me feedback. That's always with you. And then I see you drag off the audience. Like there was one point where you were playing and somebody at the back of the room yelled, "Woo!" And you kind of went, hey, you did an ear check. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to continue. So I like that. I like the fact that you have that level of professionalism that allows you to both engage with real audience as well as have the one that runs in your head, like you say, during the process of adaptation of the work that you do and producing the material in session, so that it doesn't seem as sessional. Because you listen to some albums and they say, sessional. Yep, that sounds sessional to me. You don't sound, and then you get the same album comes out live at someplace, the Hollywood Bowl, wherever, and that's an entirely different music. You feel the places where your heart kind of goes, oh yeah. Now I've got an emotional component to this. Whereas sessional, it's like, okay, yeah, it's really good music. but it's a session.
Yeah, I mean, it's also partly about creating the vibe in the session. I mean, like I'm extremely lucky that all my bandmates are really great dudes. They're really funny dudes. Like there's a lot of interplay and give and take when we're not playing, and like Ben Duff is a wonderfully goofy character. Like in the most wonderful way possible. And so there are all kinds of sessions, or all kinds of points during the session where he had the rest of us in stitches. You know, whereas he was writing stuff on the wall there's like felt on the wall that if you brushed it a certain way he could write things. But then, you know, we're pointing Ben that now the video guy's got to come in and scrape it off so it doesn't show up in the video. But so yeah, I mean, all that kind of stuff helps, and having the video guys there helped a lot because they set up lighting in a way that looked awesome. And I mean, I don't know how the other guys felt in their booths, but me in the main room with the big light down on me, like I felt kind of like I was on stage. You know, it's still a little different because I didn't have the boys around me, but yeah, there are ways of creating the vibe in the studio, and I mean it may seem like small stuff, but it's important because especially like the studio is stressful. You know, recording's expensive, and you know, stuff always goes wrong somehow, some way. Things are going to go wrong. Like during the Convergence session, on the first day, it rained really heavily. So the piano was having all kinds of problems. Our poor piano tuner, we had to have come back 3 times. And on the 3rd time, it was because the piano dropped a lead weight. So one of the hammers wouldn't retract, because the lead weight dropped because the humidity was so up there because it had been such a big rainstorm that it was messing with the piano. And you know, and like, you know, I'm sitting in the waiting room and we're like, oh my god, the piano's broken. Oh my god, how long is it going to be till it's fixed? We've only got until 11 to get 9 more tunes. and you'll never know this from watching or listening to him playing, but poor Brown was sick as a dog. It's so actually I should tell the rest of the story of how Convergence came together, because it's harrowing. So after the solo record and several false starts of trying to book tours and get the Nick Maclean Quartet recording, Brown, the summer of 2022, Brown and I looked at our schedule then and said, okay, let's just do it. Let's just book it. Let's see what happens and just hope that nothing happens. Because, you know, things were opening back up, but COVID was still, you know, flying around. And, you know, if any one of us got COVID at a critical juncture, then that would be, you know, that would just be lights out. So we, it's maybe 5 days before rehearsal, and I get a phone call from Brown. Hey, Nick, I've tested positive for COVID. Like, oh no. And so it's just enough time that he's going to be past the time that he has to isolate for, so we can still go on tour. We got to rehearse, and Jacob's coming in from Montreal. He's got other stuff. There's no other possible time for us to rehearse. So we all double masked up in Brown's basement. Brown was off in the corner, way over there, facing away from us in the bookcase. Like, we set up a microphone so that he didn't have to play super loud, so that we could still hear him, but there weren't like particles being ejected out of his trumpet at us. Like, it was nuts. And it worked. None of us got COVID. But you know, then we hit the road, and I had a whole bunch of rapid tests, knowing, you know, we're going to be in front of like hundreds of people over these next 2 weeks. We could get COVID, and like my wife took our daughter and went to Ottawa while we were on tour, because our daughter was like 6 months at the time, so we really didn't want her to get sick because our immune system was still developing. So she just went and hung out with her parents and my parents while I was on tour, so we didn't have any kind of cross contamination. And then while we're on tour, Brown is still like, he's got something in his lungs. Like, he's not sick from COVID anymore, but there's something that's still there. He can feel it. And as the tour progresses, it's like getting worse and worse. And so by the time we hit the studio, poor Brown was playing with pneumonia in his lungs. And he didn't know that. Like, he knew something was wrong, but he didn't know it was pneumonia. He found out, a couple days after the session when he went to the doctor, like, yeah, you have pneumonia. And I was sick as a dog too. Like, I just caught a cold. Like, I wasn't testing positive for anything, but it's the poor like recording engineers. Brown and I are sitting in a corner going and the studio engineers like giving us the side eye. They actually pulled us aside, like, okay, listen, what's going on? It's like, don't worry, we've both been testing like every day for the last week. It's nothing serious, just a cold. I mean, he's got pneumonia, but we're not going to give you anything awful. But it's so when we finished the session, Brown was really proud of the band, and he was not feeling at all good about his own playing, because he felt like he'd been fighting the horn the entire time. He had pneumonia in his lungs. But when I showed him the edits, like a month later, it's like, oh, hey, I actually really like that trumpet player. and again, it's from listening to him, you'd never know it. I mean, that's really a testament to like the power that you get from Brown when he sticks that horn on his face, because even through pneumonia, he sounds world class. Yeah. So you
should have pneumonia more often. I mean, Don't say I said that. Don't say I said that.
But So we ended up naming the record Convergence, owing due to the convergence of all of these different factors, like the finding Jacob and Ben, knowing that this is an iteration of the band that we really wanted to get on tape, like as soon as we could. Finally having things open up long enough for us to be able to actually record and do that kind of stuff, being able to dodge COVID and not have an infection that came in and just stopped us in our tracks during that process. And then also immediately before the session, we got extraordinarily lucky. We received grant support from, I think it was the Canada Council for the Arts. It was the first one to come in. And they gave us some bread to record, and then the Toronto Arts Council came back and said, "Yep, we're gonna fund you too." And then the Ontario Arts Council came back, so we had three grants, and these are hard grants to get. Getting all three is like winning the lottery. It's
Convergence. Well, it is.
Yeah, it's Convergence. So I'm this record is really special to me. Like I'm really proud of the playing that went on it. Like I think Jacob, Ben, and Brown all gave an incredible part of themselves to record on this record. I'm really proud of the attention and the care that they took with all of my tunes and the amount of themselves that they injected into it, because I love all of their playing, and they've got such distinct personalities, and to have them on this record is really special. We also have some guest artists on the record. On Dolphin Dance, the group's original bass player Jesse Dici sits in on the bass chair for that one, and it's so wonderful to have Jesse back in that chair. I miss playing with him. I'm so happy for his success. Like I know it's been a goal of his to play with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra for a long time, so I'm so happy that he's doing that lots, and now he's got a trio that he's playing with lots with his own tunes, and they're releasing a record pretty soon. So he's doing fantastically, and so it was so good to play with him again. And then on Eye of the Hurricane, we feature a young up-and-coming drummer on the Toronto scene named Matteo Mancuso, who's a phenomenal drummer, really talented young cat who played with Nick Maclean Quartet a bunch during the pandemic, when Jacob was in Jacob's still in Montreal, but he was in Montreal doing his master's degree at McGill University, so he wasn't able to make it back for the odd gig. So Matteo was the guy that we pulled in whenever Jacob wasn't available, and so we feature him on Eye of the Hurricane. He sounds fantastic. And Then we on Eye of the Hurricane, we also feature the multi-Juno winner Mike Downs on bass. Mike Downs was the head of the bass department when I was at Humber. He's always been a Canadian jazz idol of mine. I mean, he's got he's got an incredible discography of deeply artistic work. And years before, when we were doing the Rites of Ascension CD release at the Rex, Jesse wasn't available for the date. He was doing some kind of symphony thing. It wasn't with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. It was with someone else. But we asked Mike if he would be at all interested in subbing in, pretty please, and he said yes, and it was so much fun, man, and it was. Rehearsal with Mike Downs was an incredible experience, because here were all these like hard tunes that all of us had been slaving over for a year, learning like all these weird things moving in different places, and Mike Downs sat down at rehearsal and he played them like he'd been playing them his whole life.
So that was a man crush there. It sounds a bit of a man crush on that one, though. We got this guy came in and he just on it.
Yeah, and so it was really special to be able to play with him at our Toronto CD release of Rites of Ascension. So when it came time to record Convergence, I really hoped that he would guest on one of the tunes, and he was gracious enough to do that. So it's again, he sounds ridiculous on Eye of the Hurricane. And then on Brownman's tune, Wisdom of Aurelius, we have Luisito Orbegoso, one of Canada's greatest living percussion players. He's a top call for all of the Latin ensembles in Toronto, and I mean, he does recording for all kinds of ensembles across Canada and globally. And so he recorded congas and bells for Wisdom of Aurelius, and really elevated that tune and just deepened the Latin influences in it. I love what he does on that tune.
Yeah, so that's something I noted on the tune, that it has that bossa nova feel. It's that taking jazz over to the Latin side of the fence.
It's not bossa nova, actually. Bossa nova is a style of music that comes from Brazil. So bossa nova, samba,
Brazilian Latin, you're talking about Latin, Spanish.
Yeah, whereas Wisdom of Aurelius takes influences from Cuban jazz, which is more salsa, dealing with like piano montunos and clave and that kind of thing.
I'm being educated in music in my interview. That's so nice. But I thank you. I thank you for that, because I mean, it expands my knowledge. I have a general sense of this sounds like this. And to be corrected in a very positive way, it allows me to go, okay, so it's a Brazilian influence if it sounds like this. It is a Cuban Spanish influence if it sounds like that. And now my brain goes, okay, I can separate the two. And now when I'm listening, I've got a more diverse vocabulary in music. And I like that. Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't take offense at all.
Well, I mean, that was me years ago. Because I mean, it's these very different styles often get lumped together just under the umbrella of Latin jazz. Exactly. And I mean, back in the 1960s when, 60s and before, like a lot of Blue Note artists were incorporating Latin influences into their music, but it kind of became its own thing. Like it wasn't like capital L Latin music. A lot of it wasn't. But it took some of those flavors, but it became its own kind of Blue Note thing. So a lot of jazz guys, including myself, we listened to that growing up, and so that informs our Latin jazz. But here like there are all these like enormously rich traditions coming from these different countries that have a much deeper authenticity to them. So when you like in terms of the Latin jazz part of it, and so when you investigate them, you can start to see the differences between them. So Brown sorted me out, because he's got a lot of Latin jazz influences. Like he spent many years in Havana learning from some of the greats there. And so he sorted me out on the difference between Brazilian jazz and Cuban jazz, and every now and again I'll still play a montuno when we're playing a samba just to piss him off, but.
Well, you say no. It's just grow, expand, take yourself out of Cuba, do a little bit of
fusion.
He's got to evolve. I had one singer. They were going to be incorporating some Creole and Caribbean styles. I think it's Sika. Is it Sika? I can't.
I'm not sure. I'm not very familiar with those styles.
Yeah, and the thing is, hearing the styles, it's something that you need to investigate, because there's some interesting flavors and twists to it that, you know, you get a Cuban Latin flavor, and then you throw in a little Creole, and all of a sudden the music takes a different twist, right? So like Someday Your Dream May Come, you go through that drunken waltz, and if you threw in Creole, it'd be, whoa, this is an entirely different step. This is an entirely different beat and music, and everybody's kind of, where are we headed with this? And then you could throw in them, you know, over in Brazilian for a little while before, you know, Brown comes in, no, and throws back into Cuban jazz. But yeah, it's, for me, hearing the different styles and, you know, getting the separations on the different styles. So again, I'm like you, I started out thinking this is Latin jazz. No, split it up. You know, you can look at the world from 70,000 feet and say, this is this. And then you get in a little closer and you go, oh no, I can see the subtle differences. I now can see that this is one and this is the other. And I imagine that in Cuban jazz, there's probably 2 or 3 flavors of it, right? You get the underground flavor.
There's a ton of different flavors of it.
Yeah, exactly. So as you get deeper into it, the intricacies split you apart again, and you're going, oh, that's some of this, that's some of this, that's some of this, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Right? And that's one of the beauty of the interconnectedness that we have today, because there can be so much cross-pollination between different genres. I mean, on this record, we very intentionally took some more Cuban influences. We took some hip-hop influences here and there. You know, there's a few nods to electric jazz for the use of electronics, and there's a couple of funk influences here and there with a couple of the tunes. I love taking these kind of things from different areas, because jazz music has grown to a place where it encompasses so much, and the heart of it really is in the improvisation these days. It's in the spontaneity of the interactions between the musicians, and everything else is just different flavors and different avenues that you can take that ethos down.
That's right. Adaptations of generics that, you know, people listen to and they say, that's this. And you go, okay, but listen to my adaptation that throws in a little, oh, I like that. I mean, Herbie Hancock did that with Mwandishi, right? He had African influences in that music that nobody had listened to before. Like, certain cultures did. This is their music. And he took it and went, I really like this. I want to embed this in my jazz. So that was his 71 album. And we know Mwandishi is composer, which, you know, you could label that for yourself if you want. You can do a Herbie Hancock Mwandishi, right? But it's taking and adapting cultural norms and evolving them. And I mean, you're very good at that. I find that you take music and you adapt and you sort of give it a little bit of a twist that makes it not standard, not something that's basic that people listen to and they're not saying, oh yeah, I know what I'm going to listen to, right? Oh, I'm going to listen to this. Like Christmas music, we circle back to that. The moment people say Christmas music, everybody knows what they're going to be listening to. Everybody, it's the same. It doesn't matter if it's different songs. It's the same basic principles in music. Whereas you take your Christmas from Snaggle with the Christmas music, and people go, "What the heck is that? that is not a Christmas song." Yes, it is. Just get your head out of that Christmas gutter and listen. This is music that's allowable in this season. Yeah. So I guess what we're going to do now is we're going to have a listen to you, and we're going to take us through the musical stylings of Nick Maclean and the Nick Maclean Quartet with Road Warrior. Enjoy.
All right, everyone ready? Road Warrior, take 2. 1, 2, oh.
I really want to thank you, Nick, for being a part of this conversation. An absolute pleasure speaking with you again, and seeing you again as well. I definitely have to go to more of your venues. Maybe sit a little farther away from the speaker, and not sideways. That I have to turn my head and watch you. I actually enjoy having that face-on view of you and the band playing. It was an experience. I absolutely enjoyed it. So thank you for being here. I hope the audience, my audience, the audience will enjoy listening to all of the nuances. Hopefully they've gotten an education on the difference between Cuban Latin and Brazilian Latin music, because they should. And that Christmas music doesn't need to be Christmas music. So I'm looking forward to your drop of the album in October. I'll probably go back and listen to the cuts that I know are available. But I'm excited to hear the rest of it, and some new musical creations from you. I want to hear some more adaptations. I want to hear some more pieces being thrown in. Maybe go and investigate Creole, see how that fits in.
Sure.
I wouldn't mind seeing some of that. I really, really wouldn't mind seeing you, because I know you'd be able to take it. You're excessively versatile. Really love the way you adapt music, and I want to hear how you and Brownman with the horn can adapt some of that musical stylings. It would be exciting to hear that. So thank you again very, very much.
Thank you so much. I guess super quick, just so people know where to find me and where to find the record label online. So I'm Nick Maclean Quartet, and all of my ensembles are signed to Brown's Brooklyn-based record label, Brown to Source Records. This is a record label dedicated to the catalyzation of new jazz art. It's 100% not-for-profit label, so all sales, like all proceeds from album sales, go directly back to the artist. The record label takes nothing, and that was, that's Brown was signed to some of the major labels at the time, and the royalty that he got was very small. So he wanted to set up a platform to advantage young artists like myself, and try and help us to create more jazz art. So Brown to Source Records, you can find the record label at browntosaurus.com, and there's a bunch of phenomenal releases on the label, including the new one from the Nick Maclean Quartet, Convergence. You can find Brownman, our featured trumpet player, and my longtime mentor and very close friend, at brownman.com, and I would highly recommend going there, because there's all kinds of crazy stuff that he's up to there. Like this month we're doing, he's putting on a concert series in Toronto, doing tributes to 3 legendary trumpet players, Dizzy Gillespie, Freddie Hubbard, and Miles Davis. So the last 3 Fridays of September, we're diving down the rabbit hole in those 3 books, and it's going to be an absolute blast. And then people can find me at nicholasmaclean.com, and this is any show announcements. You can sign up to my mailing list, so I can email you about show announcements and other stuff. And then at the albums tab is all of the releases that I put out. Convergence isn't there yet because it's not technically out yet. It doesn't come out officially until October 24 or 27, one of those. It's whichever one's the Friday. But we're going to be doing CD release shows coming up in October and beyond. So that's the best place to find out all that information.
Fantastic. And so I guess around the Christmas season, you become Saint Nicholas Maclean at .com.